Everyone's doing well. If this is the first time you're here on one of these webinars, I'm glad you're here. I see a couple of familiar faces here in the list, so thank you for coming back. Today, we're going to talk about not just member retention, more specifically, how member retention relates to member loyalty and a few levers you can pull in your membership to drive loyalty higher. And the overall aim here is to put together a set of actions that you can implement fairly easily to notice what I'll call a fairly dramatic reduction in overall member churn. It's interesting when we think about member churn because a lot of us that run memberships, we expect churn. We constantly see churn happening, but there are so many different ways to deal with churn. And today we're going to zero in on a specific topic. We'll be talking a lot about retention discounts and how to retain members in a more effective way, in a way that helps you drive longer term value, in a way that keeps your revenue numbers upward instead of downward when churn happens. So we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things. And specifically, we're going to be looking at all of this through the lens of a recent feature that we launched here at Memberful to help you do this in a very direct way. So just as a quick overview here of what I'm going to cover in the presentation, along with what I'm going to show you after the presentation, we're going to start out with looking at some different components that involve member loyalty. And we're going to take a closer look at what I'll call a new way to look at member retention. We all probably have pre-existing thoughts on what member retention means to ourselves as membership operators, but specifically, I want to zero in on a core component of retention and how you can deal with that. And then after that, we're going to go into looking at a proven framework that you can just simply take away from this call and implement it in your membership. And I think what you're going to find is that at the end of the day, my hope here is that you walk away with this with the realization that there are some effective ways to deal with churn that don't have to be terribly manual. There's a very effective automated method that we can handle churn in the membership. And that's what we're going to zero in on. So if everyone's ready, here we go. I want you to think about, just as we start here, four words. So we've got value, loyalty, retention, and risk. Now, I'm sure we all have varying definitions of what these things mean, probably for ourselves. But I want you to think about these things through the lens of your members for a second. When we think about, let's just start with risk. So let's think about risk for a second. As a membership operator, you carry risks with you every day when it comes to how you run your business. You're probably very intimately aware of what those risks are, but as a member or a prospective member that's coming to your membership for the first time or has seen your membership before, maybe they haven't purchased yet. And if we think about what risk does through the eyes of a member, risk is the single decision driver among your members when it comes to whether or not they'll choose to purchase, whether or not they'll retain for the long term, whether or not they will pay a given price for your product. Now, I think the most significant aspect to these four things we're going to talk about here is that all members experience these things differently. All of your members are going to evaluate their risks differently. All of your members are going to interpret risks differently. So when we think about risk in the membership, today specifically, I want you to be thinking about risk from the standpoint of a member and how that member may view risk when it comes to whether or not to purchase. And then after they purchase, what are the ongoing risks that a member experiences that can potentially contribute to churn? Number two, we've got value. So value has lots of definitions. I think we could talk all day about what value is. We could talk about what value looks like to this member and what value looks like to another member. But the core focus here of value is that I want you to think of value as being the antidote to risk inside your membership. And what I mean by that is that given that all of your members experience risk differently and interpret risks differently, we have one specific thing that we can do to directly reduce the amount of risk that a member perceives, and that is to amplify value. And we're going to talk about how to do that today. We're going to talk about how to communicate that. We're going to talk about what value even means to a member and how you can zero in on that in order to drive some of these results that I think you're after. as I said earlier, all members are going to perceive the value that you provide differently. Some members probably value your membership at an extraordinarily high level. Those are going to be your most loyal members. You've got members that are probably lukewarm on your membership, but they're still happy to stick around and pay to consume your content because they still find enough value in what they do. And lower down the spectrum, we end up with a segment of members who maybe at one time had a very high level of perceived value, and maybe that value has changed over time. That perceived value has changed over time, which is to be expected to a degree in a membership. But when we think about value, we're ultimately going to get back to a conversation about price, because price will have a direct correlation with how someone perceives value of your product and your membership. And loyalty, let's think about how long members even stay around once they're in your membership. So loyalty is simply the willingness of a member to remain a paying customer over a specific amount of time. In our own perfect scenarios, regardless of the type of membership that you run, what you're going to find is that all of our members and all of the members in different industries carry different capacities for loyalty. So what does that mean? That means that any given member is probably carrying with them a varying degree of how long they can remain loyal to your product, how long they can remain loyal to your membership. And I want you to think about this through the lens of most members have a finite amount of loyalty to bring to the table inside your membership. A lot of us, we see our churn numbers, we see activities that result in members, dropping out of our membership. But loyalty happens for a time. Loyalty happens for a season. And I think in terms of expectations, we need to be very aware of the fact that loyalty can only last so long within a membership, because circumstances change, value systems ultimately change. And the focus here today is, how do we drive loyalty to the highest level possible in that season that a member has loyalty to provide and bring to the table? So that's the standpoint and the perspective from which I want you to think about some of these terms from. And specifically on retention, we all have our definitions of what retention means. It's a metric, it's a measure. But in terms of our conversation today, let's just be aligned on the fact that ultimately the retention is simply the measure of your membership's ability to hold on to paying members over time. And of all these four topics and these four words we just looked at here, the question is, what is the relationship between all four of them? And if we can crack the code on how each of these tie together to each other, then we put ourselves in a much better position to not only retain more members, but more importantly, to reduce churn to a level that your revenue is still able to grow without the presence of headwinds. And a headwind that's always present when it comes to membership growth is churn. We always will have to deal with churn. There is no membership that has no churn. Churn is to be expected. So the relationship between all of these moving parts here is what we're going to talk about from this point on. And I think the primary point of focus here is that retention is simply determined by the balance of risk, value, and loyalty within your membership. And if we just think about what this means for a second, this is a very key point that I hope you take away today, is that all of these elements, they don't need to be viewed individually. They all come together in harmony to produce a specific result. And specifically, there's one point in time in your membership where all of these things are in perfect harmony and will work the best they ever can. And that point is precisely the moment in time at which a member decides to sign up for your membership. You think about day one of someone becoming a member. The perceived risk and the perceived value all was exactly where it needed to be in order for that member to make the decision to commit to your product on a recurring basis. And when we think about how these things evolve and how these things change throughout the life cycle of membership, we're going to find that time is the natural disruptor of the balance of these things. And I don't say this as, from a standpoint of there's no way to prevent this. Obviously, this is to be expected. It's inevitable that the balance of these things here will become disrupted over time. It's a natural progression. But what we do know is that time alone is the single and natural disruptor of the balance of these things. So then we have to ask ourselves the question, given these facts and given this perspective, what do we have available to us inside our membership to influence and restore the balance of these three components to maximize the loyalty and the retention that we experience from individual members across the membership? And if we just think about for a second why a member may churn, or why a member decides to cancel their membership at month 3 in a 1-year membership, think about this for a second. And across the total trajectory of member life cycles, change and circumstances, they're always happening in the background. Value systems change, perception of value changes, price sensitivity, how sensitive a member is to your pricing on a recurring basis is going to change. And you should always expect this. And I think what we're going to get at today is going to lay the foundation of not only how you should expect this to unfold in the membership, but more importantly, how do you prepare for it and how you optimize for this? Because how you optimize your membership and plan for expected churn is going to have a dramatic difference on your 2 and 3 and 5 year projections of total revenue that you will experience, given given the underlying mechanics of whatever your membership happens to be. So if we just think about for a few minutes why members churn, if we look across the board at membership in general, roughly 70% of all membership churn will occur due to 2 primary reasons. Those are declines in perceived value over time. And number 2 is the increased price sensitivity that a member may experience over time. Number 1 here, the decline in perceived value, that naturally, sometimes these things go hand in hand. Like if your perceived value of a product is changing over time, you're obviously becoming more price sensitive to that product over time. We need to think through the lens of, when this happens, what do we have available at our disposal to directly restore the balance, and how do we bring price sensitivity down and perceived value back up over time for members who have been in the membership for a given amount of time? And if we think about what that lever is that we can pull, that lever is specifically retention discounts. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What is a retention discount? How you can use it, how you can automate it, and more importantly, what is the ultimate effect that can have on your overall revenue in the membership on a very long-term basis. And just to clearly set the table here for what we mean when we say retention discounts, these are going to be, think about it, you've probably seen these 100 times, is where you're a part of a membership or you're a consumer of a product where you take an action to disable a membership, or you take an action to cancel a service, and you will see some sort of effort brought forth by the company that which you've had a relationship with, and they want to retain you for longer amounts of time, and they're willing to lower prices in order to do that. And regardless of how aggressive those discounts may be or how aggressive those discounts may seem, the reason that we see this so frequently is because it's without a doubt far cheaper to retain you as a paying customer rather than having to go find a new paying customer and acquire a new paying customer, because acquisition costs of new members are dramatically higher than what you will forgo on a discounted basis when it comes to retaining a member at a lower price. So that is what we mean by retention discounts. And specifically, this feature in Memberful that we released a few weeks ago that you have available now is essentially, it's a highly targeted way to communicate with members who intend to churn. These are the folks who have disabled auto renew. These are the folks who have canceled their membership, and they've already made the conscious decision to leave that membership. However, why are they leaving the membership? Well, data suggests that upwards of 30 to 40% of all churn that's going to happen in your membership is going to happen based on price sensitivity alone. And that is a huge opportunity when it comes to how you can keep your revenue levels up year after year after year while minimizing your churn. Because if we think about driving long-term customer loyalty, the amount of time that a member chooses to stay with your membership, we can compensate for all of these changes that a member experiences in perceived value and price sensitivity. And I want to talk about two core criteria when it comes to what this feature looks like. And then I'm going to show you how to use this feature in your membership. And then we're going to circle back here. I've got a set of basically best practices and starting points for you that you can implement right away based off of essentially a year's worth of churn research that we did internally. And number one of a core criteria that we're going to talk about is the plan that a member is on. So you may offer a monthly plan, you may offer a quarterly plan, you may offer some combination of monthly, quarterly, and annual plans. Regardless, we're going to be targeting members here at the plan level, number one. Number two, we're going to look at specifically how much time has elapsed since that member has been an active member. So what do I mean by that? If someone purchases an annual membership from your company, they've got 12 months of service that they've paid for. But at month 4, for whatever reason, they have decided to cancel. Maybe it's because of price sensitivity. Maybe it's because of a change in perceived value. Regardless of what that is, we can target members based on how long they chose to remain an active member before they deliberately decided to cancel. These two things are the most significant factors in play when it comes to what that member will respond to downstream when it comes to retention discount offers that you can then provide to that member in order to retain them for a longer amount of time at a lower price. And what we're going to see is that your highest redemption rates of these types of retention offers will always occur within the segment of your longest standing members. And at a high level, that makes sense because the ones who have been around the longest are the ones who are finding clearly the most ongoing value from whatever it is that you're providing to them on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to switch screens here and I'm going to show you what this looks like in the dashboard, because the part I want you to take away from all of this is the fact that this can be set up with very specific intention. This feature can be delivered at scale, which is important, but you want to make sure the proper amount of thought and care is put into the feature on the front end in order to maximize the results you're going to see on the back end of this effort. So there's a new section in the dashboard. So if you're on the homepage in your dashboard, if you go to discounts and navigate down to retention, this is the new guy right here, retention section. And this is where we're going to set up and create any retention discount that we may want to pass along to members on a given plan in order to retain those members on a lower price basis because they have become price sensitive over time. And just so you know, I always recommend, so first of all, when you're setting this up later, after we've gone through this presentation, you're going to have a switch here that you're going to want to enable this, but do not enable this feature until you get your retention discount set up the way you want. So that's just a side note after you leave, when you walk away with this today, is to enable the feature once you have everything set up. So let's talk about how you actually do this. So if you've got a mix of plans, let's say you've got a monthly plan, an annual plan, and a quarterly plan. I would highly suggest, even though you can target this you can target this globally. You can target every member on every plan, regardless of renewal cadence, if you want. I do not recommend doing that because what you're going to find and what we're going to talk about is that members respond to specific thresholds of retention discounts to a different degree depending on what type of plan that they are on at a given time. So monthly members respond differently than quarterly members will. And on average, annual members will respond differently than monthly and quarterly members will. So I would suggest that you select a specific plan to target. And let's just say we've got a monthly plan. We're going to select our monthly plan. And this is the criteria, your targeting criteria that we talked about earlier. And it's very simple, But a great starting point here is that you want to establish the minimum amount of time that a member has to have been active before they took deliberate action to cancel this membership. So let's say for a monthly member, we want to set a threshold for 3 months, and we want to pass along a 50% discount that is a recurring discount to the member who cancels and satisfies this criteria at the time of cancellation. So keep in mind, your member must satisfy this criteria. They must be on this plan. They must satisfy the amount of time that they have to have been active for before they can even be eligible for such an offer. So when we save this discount and we have this discount set up, we have a new email template in the dashboard. So if you go to customize and then let's see, email templates here, there's a section down at the bottom that's called retention discount. This is new. This specifically goes along with this feature. And you do not have to enable this email. It will get enabled automatically when you enable your own retention program. But just to show you the flavor of how this works and what the flow looks like for a member, you're going to have this email that gets turned on. And this email will go out to the member who canceled a membership precisely 1 hour after they've canceled their membership. So that criteria is satisfied. A member hits cancel in their account. 1 hour after that, they're going to receive this email. You can massage the copy in this to be whatever you want, but a few core elements here that I highly suggest that you maintain. Number one, try to make this email highly, highly personal. If possible, make this email, let the messaging here be as if it came directly from a founder or directly from an individual who has a high amount of visibility in your membership. That is going to drive significantly higher results if you do that. I think the personal element here is probably more significant than the discount itself. So just keep that in mind. And the second thing to keep in mind here is that when your member receives this offer, if you choose to send it, members have to take advantage of this offer, or members have to claim this offer before their membership fully expires. So if it's month 4 on an annual membership and that member has canceled at month 4, they have to take advantage of this offer before month 12 expires and they become fully churned out of the membership. So that adds an element, it's like an added element of scarcity, and it's an added element of urgency here when it comes to how this feature works. So I would recommend that you keep something that clearly communicates that in this email, because it's highly relevant and it's highly significant when it comes to the overall conversion rate of your offer. But once your member receives this email, they're going to click the link in this email. They'll get taken directly to their Memberful account. And essentially with one click, they can apply that. They can claim the offer. The offer gets applied automatically to their subscription. Their subscription gets automatically re-enabled, and that member has essentially has returned to a paying member status. Even though it's at a discounted rate, you're able to use this feature to discover pricing that makes sense for your membership, for which members respond the most to. And I'll give you some guidelines on what makes sense here in terms of what those thresholds are that drive the most results. But I just wanted you to see this email because that's the flow. That is what the member experiences. And something else I'll notice that I'll call out that you may notice, all of the messaging here in the admin side of the dashboard talks about this from the standpoint of being a retention discount. But your member will not see this messaging. Everything that your member sees uses the verbiage as loyalty discount. So this will be presented to your member as a loyalty discount. They will not see that they're being offered a retention discount or anything of that nature. They see this specifically show up in their account as a loyalty discount. And back to the page where we set all this up. Once you have all of these discounts where you want them to be, keep in mind here, you can create multiple instances of a retention discount for the same plan with different triggers. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. But when it comes to triggers, triggers being the amount of time that a member has to have been active, you may find that you want to have a segment of offers that go out at one end of the spectrum and a totally different segment of offers that get distributed at the other end of the spectrum. It depends on how well defined your churn happens to be at a given moment in time, but everything will remain collectively presented here in terms of what the trigger is. So you'll see this in descending order for the trigger time that you set up for the retention discount that goes out to your members. Now, one of the other things that we need to talk about here is, where do we start? Where does it make sense to start in terms of a framework and putting this out to your members at scale at a level that makes sense to your membership? And this is what that looks like. So I will tell you across the board, when you think about this feature as deliberately being a more aggressive type feature, but aggressive from the perspective of this member who's been in the membership for 8, 12, 15 months has paid me a significant amount of money. That member has then made the conscious decision to leave the membership. What can I, as the membership operator, do to retain that member and bring that perceived value back up to where it was at the time they purchased the membership for the very first time? And that these discount thresholds, they are certainly aggressive, but they are much lower on a dollar scale compared to what your customer acquisition cost may be. And what we find consistently across the board is that, on average, anyone who implements these thresholds of discounts, whether you're on an annual membership, quarterly or monthly, it doesn't matter. The average reduction in churn that you can expect to see is around 30%. However, I have personally seen numbers approach the 50% mark, depending on what threshold that you choose to deliver at scale. So that is very important. And again, it's aggressive, but it's intended to be aggressive, because if you're able to reduce your churn by just 30% per year with something like this, then what you're going to find is, in the next 1, 2, and 3 years, by the time you hit the 3-year mark, if all else being equal, your membership revenue will be 22 to 25% higher if nothing else changes, other than the fact if you're able to retain members who intend to churn at discounted rates. So that's a major takeaway here, because even though the threshold of discounting here, it can feel aggressive, the downstream impact on revenue from a cohort of members who have already provided such value into the membership is highly significant. So again, it's a very targeted way to hit members that have decided to leave because of price sensitivity. It's like the last ditch effort to retain this person and make this person feel like they have been so appreciated throughout this journey of time, so that you can then retain them and meet that pricing level that makes sense for their circumstances. And again, everyone has different circumstances when it comes to the reasons for canceling. But when we think about the minimum time active that makes sense to set up on these thresholds, so for a monthly plan, I have 2 suggestions here. So I would not go obviously, you're not going to want to offer members a discount who cancel after month 1. I do not suggest doing that under any circumstance. If your membership has a very high churn rate, specifically a high churn rate that happens early on in the journey of membership, then that should inform this minimum amount of time active that you set in the threshold. The average that I see here that works best is 3 months of membership at the monthly level, in order to produce the most results. And members that pay on a monthly basis are harder to retain when it comes to retention discounts. That's because the price savings that they're realizing on a month-to-month basis are so much lower on a dollar basis than they would be for an annual member who pays the full 12 months up front. So keep that in mind. That's why, an aggressive discount is usually needed here at the front end for a monthly member, because let's say take an $8 a year membership, a 50% discount is only $4 a month. It takes a significant amount of time to recoup savings at $4 a month, rather than the guy who pays $60 a month for an annual membership and gets to take advantage of the full $30 in savings at the time of renewal. So just keep that in mind for your monthly members when you choose to roll this out. I always suggest that the discounts occur on a recurring basis. That tends to be the setting or the method by which members respond to for the most amount of time, meaning that once they're retained at a lower rate, the journey that they take from that point onward is highly influenced by the nature of the coupon or the discount itself. And then as long as that is on a recurring basis, you optimize and basically maximize the amount of time that member can potentially stick around. If we look at quarterly plans, I always suggest being, at a minimum, no less than the first renewal cycle. So that gets you at the 3-month mark for a quarterly plan. 3 to 4 months, if you have members that cancel relatively quickly, quarterly plans do bring about a lower amount of churn than monthly members. So you have some room here when it comes to what you decide to roll out at scale. But I will say that typically there would not be a reason to bring this about at a cadence less than requiring a minimum of 3 months. That's typically the sweet spot. And for annual members, the 5 to 6 month mark tends to feel natural and tends to capture the activity of most members, because most members on an annual membership, if you have a fairly decent churn rate, they're not canceling the membership until month 10 or closer to the 12-month mark. So months 10, 11, and 12 are typically pretty significant in annual memberships. That's why if you keep that threshold below that, you're guaranteed to capture those people, but you're also going to capture people who may decide to cancel halfway on or earlier on in the journey. If you don't want to have just a single swipe at this that captures the most folks possible, you could always set up multiple time cadences within the same plan to capture 2 different segments of people. You could also use that to offer different discount amounts. So what does that look like in practice? Maybe I have an annual membership where a significant number of people cancel at month 3. And there's not a lot of churn that happens between month 3 and month 10. But at month 10, I have a lot of other members who then decide to cancel. So the question is, what is the right discount approach to provide to members who cancel at both ends of the spectrum? You don't have to use one approach here. You can set up a discount and a trigger for folks hit at the 3-month mark, and you can set up a separate trigger for the ones who hit at the 10-month mark. And I will tell you that on average, the earlier a member cancels in their journey, so they've been a member for a very small amount of time, typically those are the folks that are the hardest to retain. And those are the folks that would technically require a more aggressive discount to be in the mix. So there's a lot of reasons why people cancel. Obviously, if it's because of a market product fit, then a discount probably isn't going to overcome that barrier. But if it's part of the 70% of cases where it directly relates to price, and this isn't to say your membership isn't worth the price you charge, but you got to remember that regardless of how many people are in this membership, there is an infinite amount of combinations of factors that can come into play that changes that perceived value. So, the guy who uses your membership, once a day or engages with your content once per day, he's not interested in canceling his membership because his perceived value is so much higher than the other guy who's using it once a month. So this is a great method for some price discovery. This is a great method for you to actually zero in on what makes sense for your specific membership and what the discount threshold should be. But I will always say that this is a great starting point, because typically, on average, once you get below 50%, the results start to trail off. And what do I mean by that? The conversion rate or the redemption rate of such offers drops dramatically once you go below the 50% threshold. Conversely, it rises dramatically when you stay at or above the 50% threshold. So keep that in mind. And just to wrap up here before we go into Q&A, just as a best practice, it's just a visual for you to lock this in here, is that if we think about membership duration, from the least amount of time in a membership to the most amount of time, save your conservative discounts for, if you're going to try to retain people early on in the journey, keep that discount conservative, because you don't want to undercut yourself so much that a member cancels at 1 month in just to get a discount. That's why I always say keep that threshold of time at a healthy level, and don't put it too close to the early spot in the journey. And then, when you think about the members who have been around the longest, the people who have been around for a year or two, this is where you can get highly aggressive on what you can do to retain them on a price basis. Those are the folks that will respond the best. These are the folks who have already demonstrated the largest capacity of loyalty toward your product. So those are the ones that naturally make the most sense to roll out an aggressive discount to. So I hope this is helpful. I'm going to switch back over to Lauren here, and then she can let us know of any questions that any of you guys have.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I will just mention there was one question that came through and I answered it just in chat. Julie was asking about the differences between recurring, one-time, and limited. So I was just mentioning, recurring goes on forever, one-time is applied once, and limited could be a limited amount of time, like apply it 3 times and then stop. So in case that wasn't clear for anyone else, I just answered that one in the chat. And so we have quite a few, so I'm so excited. Let's dig in here. I'm going to start here with an anonymous attendee who asked, would you suggest doing a retention strategy like this when you have the choose what you pay option enabled?
So great question. Typically with choose what you pay pricing structures, the member already has freedom to ultimately alter whatever it is they choose to contribute or whatever it is they choose to pay. This could become slightly confusing with that scenario. However, if you think you have members on a choose what you pay program that are maybe they're just not as engaged as you would like them to be, if you want to just save them some manual effort from editing what they choose to pay, you could certainly trigger this and send this along, and with 2 clicks, they can alter their paying structure, and then they continue on. I don't think it can hurt. I just think on that structure specifically, you want to make sure that the time threshold that you set makes sense in terms of what the trajectory is. Like if you've got data that suggests members don't typically stop contributing until month 5 or month 6, then maybe be very deliberate about where you put that trigger on a time basis.
Excellent. Good. Another question from the same attendee. This person is asking about adjusting the timing of when the email sends. So I'll mention quickly that you can't change the timing, but the person's asking, is there a reason we went with the 1 hour as the standard? And I think you were quite involved in that discussion, Michael, so you probably have some insight into that.
Yeah, so the 1 hour was not just a number that was like, picked out of a hat. There's some deliberate thought behind this and some research, and I'll explain in detail what that is. We've all seen abandoned cart emails before. Abandoned cart emails go out. We add an item to a cart, a physical item usually, where we get an email rather quickly after that action is taken, and we don't follow through with a purchase. And when it comes to digital products, membership-based products, what we found is that offers and email touch points that happened immediately, and when I say immediately, I mean they cancel, and within 30 seconds, the email comes through. That approach and that time scenario often, or fairly often, can come across to a member's perspective as being almost so automated that it feels not personal at all. So if I went and canceled if I'm in your membership today and I hit cancel, and then within seconds, I see this email pop through. I don't feel as good about things as I do if I have an hour that's gone by and I get what appears to be a personal email from a founder or from a community manager, where the hour that's allowed to elapse there is specifically meant to create a more personal touch and a natural passage of time, rather than it just feeling like a trigger that happens and then the member gets something so quickly that it just doesn't feel personal at all. So that is the thinking and the research behind why the 1 hour trigger was used.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to a question from Patrick. Patrick says, won't every yearly member automatically hit the minimum time active if it's less than a year? Why set it at a few months if everyone hits it?
Right. So if you have a yearly member who cancels, let's say, so there's a couple scenarios that happen. So it's month 10 on a 1 year membership. If my trigger is not set less than month 10, then the member will not hit the trigger. If I was to set my trigger at month 11 and this member cancels at month 10, they're not going to receive the discount because they don't meet that criteria. So yes, it is possible to have a member on an annual membership that doesn't hit the trigger and doesn't receive an offer. And that also does not suggest that just because an annual member cancels before the 1 year mark, that they by default will receive any offer, because they have to remember, the way the feature works is that the member has to have that membership cancellation and that auto renewal turned on for this specific amount of time. And if they haven't had that number of consecutive months elapse before they take that action, then they're not going to hit the trigger and they will not be eligible for that particular discount.
Great. And another question from Patrick. This is sort of a feature request, so we can say it here and discuss it a little bit. So he says, I have a monthly plan that is no longer available for purchase. It doesn't appear in the retention page. I'd still love to offer a discount anyway. So that's valid.
Yeah, it's a valid point. So in that case, in that specific case, what I would suggest would be, I don't know how large this plan is in your case, but this is an instance where you would do this manually. Obviously, the trigger and the automated element to what we're talking about today the version 1 of this has been designed for plans that are active and plans that members can actively come in and out of. But you can still achieve this. Typically it would look like here's how that could look. Let's say over the course of a month, you've had 20 people disable the renewal on their membership. They've chose to cancel. So what you could do is you could go into the dashboard. You could just do a quick export of all those activities and then use that list in your email service provider to send your own manual campaign. And you could do that. And the way that you could do that logistically on the coupon side of things would just be to set up a personal coupon that you create and then pass that coupon code along to that list of folks in the email. But yes, the feature itself today is specifically geared at plans that are actively open for signups.
Great. Okay, let's move on to another question because we have quite a few more. Something kind of in line with what we've been talking about. Tegan is asking about members who immediately turn off auto renew because they hate recurring charges. How are these members treated? Are they given the retention discount immediately too? And Michael, I'm guessing that's why you talked about a certain amount of months involved in people being active members, so that it's not getting that if, let's say, they sign up for a membership and turn off auto renew right away, they haven't necessarily been active. But tell me if I'm on the right track there.
Yeah. So let's say for a monthly member that my first trigger is set for three months of active time. And I have someone that joins my monthly plan and immediately after purchase, they disable the renewal. They automatically turn the renewal off, whether that's a monthly membership or an annual membership. It doesn't matter. If there was that would be, it would be impossible through the way the feature is built to have that member receive a retention discount, because you can't target folks that have had a minimum amount of time for less than a month. So if you're now the other scenario here is that maybe there is something maybe you want to touch base with the members who cancel immediately. But a lot of times if people are canceling immediately, maybe they're on like, government accounts or accounts that are reimbursed by their employer. So they have to turn off auto renew. There's some pretty stiff rules around that, I know, in several organizations. So for the members, so at that level, for someone who disables immediately after purchasing, you would not need to worry about that member being provided a discount unless they're canceling between month one and whatever the trigger point is that you set. So that's why I always suggest keep the trigger point at least 3 to 4 months out on the plan. That way, that member is not going to hit that threshold if they cancel immediately right after they sign up.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. A sort of unrelated question, but it's one that I think people are thinking about. So Matt is saying that we're coming up on 11 months into our launch, and we have a ton of annual members about to hit 12 months. We've had very few people choose not to renew. And then he's asking, is there any way this would remind them they can cancel? What other reminders will they get? When will they get them? So I can talk about one part, which is, and Michael was touching on like sort of, we're not lawyers, I'm talking legality, sort of the best business practices, which is before an annual renewal, we do have an email that goes out 31 days before, just letting people know, hey, we're going to charge your card in a month. This is there for a variety of reasons. One being you never want to surprise someone with a charge, because that could, if someone didn't use your membership, they weren't involved, and all of a sudden they see a charge, they're coming back at you for a refund, they're putting up a dispute with the bank, and there's other reasons for that email. But in terms of your question, you said there's only a few who chose not to renew. So you're saying, if you use this feature and they turn off auto renew and they're meeting the criteria of the retention series, then they would get an email prompting them to use the coupon code to continue the membership. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Michael.
Yeah. So keep in mind that technically on the way the feature works is that no member will receive a retention offer that looks backward. What I mean by that, if you have members that satisfy the criteria, but you did not have that criteria active and enabled in the dashboard, just to be clear, those members will not receive a retention discount once you enable that feature. They have to satisfy the criteria from the moment you turn the feature on going forward. So it doesn't retroactively like do a look back and say, oh, I see all these people that are technically eligible for this, send them the offer. It goes active and it implements at the moment going forward.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. We've got 2 more questions, and then we'll just do one more check if anyone else has. So our original anonymous attendee was asking, if a member redeems the discount, then cancels again, would they get another discount?
No, they will not be sent a duplicate of a discount they have already received.
Great. Okay, we're down to one more question. And this is from Julie again. She's asking about some of the reports you've been referring to. For example, do we get more drop off at 3-month mark or 6-month mark? She's basically saying, are those somewhere? Where am I missing those?
Yeah. So the easy way to figure this out, typically, you could take a look at your churn rate and your lifetime value. And if you want to know what the average point in time at which a member drops out, just take your member lifetime value and divide it by the price of your membership. And that's going to give you the average time at which a member leaves or cancels their membership. You can also do this on a plan by plan basis. You can do it on a global basis. So the lifetime value line item in the metrics in the dashboard, divide that number by the price of your membership, and that's going to give you the average amount of time that your member is staying active in the membership.
Excellent. Let's see. Oh, here we go. One more question from our anonymous attendee. Can we send a follow-up email if people don't redeem the discount from the first email?
So right now there's the single email that goes out once the trigger is hit. Once that membership expires, they can't redeem the offer. There isn't a manual function that lets you resend the email. You could certainly track that manually, but the email will be delivered to that member deliberately one time and one time only.
Great. So we have a few more minutes here. So before we wrap up, and I see a little follow-up from Patrick. Patrick, we'll check in with you after about this one after the call. So I'll just do a little screenshot of that and we'll come back to you after. Is there anyone else with questions you want to drop in the Q&A? And yeah, we'll just give you a minute to drop any more questions before we wrap up for the session. Okay, well, thank you so much for attending. We love seeing you at these events and glad that you're enjoying them. Please look out for another invite. We have one more webinar in the fall series coming up in November. And also you can look out for an email from me in a little bit to share a recording and a PDF of the presentation. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time. And I'll just pass it over to you to say final goodbyes.
Yep. Thanks everyone for coming. I say this at the end of all of these things that we do, but the thing I want to point out, if you've got any follow-up questions or want some more one-on-one advice for your membership, let me know. You can either reach out to the help desk. You can email me directly, michael@memberful.com. And yeah, we'll chat about whatever it is that you've got going on.
Okay. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and chat with you soon.